Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first in our series of summer career talks here at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. My name is Faith Dukes, and I'm the Director of K12 Programs here at Berkeley Lab. And today you are joining us in a discussion about what to do with your summer experience once you have gotten the experience and joined a research laboratory or a job. Today, I am joined by three panelists who are all my colleagues here at Berkeley Lab, and they are directly involved in workforce development programs or have actually participated in those programs. And so as I call out their names, they'll join me on the virtual stage. So first, I'd like to welcome Madeline Leibovich. She has been a post-baccalaureate intern since fall 2020 at Berkeley Lab, working on experimental particle physics research within the Berkeley Atlas Group. She was also a SULE intern at Berkeley Lab in the summer of 2018 and 2019. Originally, she's from Oakland, California, and she received her BA in physics from Barnard College of Columbia University in 2020. She will be starting in the physics PhD program at UC Santa Barbara in September, where she will be studying experimental particle physics. So welcome, Madeline. Our next panelist is Dr. Michael Folsom. He is a Senior Scientific Engineering Associate in the Applied Nuclear Physics Group at Berkeley Lab. His work includes software and hardware development for radiation detector systems that combine radiation imaging algorithms with spatial data to produce 3D models with quantitative radiation close dose information. Dr. Folsom is not a stranger to national labs. Prior to joining Berkeley Lab, his scientific explorations included time at both Pacific Northwest and Oak Ridge National Laboratories. Dr. Folsom also holds a bachelor's in nuclear engineering from UC Berkeley and received his master's and PhD from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Our final panelist is Ms. Colette Flood. She is the Berkeley Lab Education Director. She manages the Workforce Development and Education Office, which implements Department of Energy funded community college, undergraduate, and graduate and faculty programs. Each year, she brings together Berkeley Lab divisions, community partners, faculty, and students to broaden participation in STEM and make sure that the next generation of researchers are prepared to tackle global issues. So with all of those bios, I'd love to welcome our panelists, remind all of our attendees that we have activated our live transcript, so you can see that at the bottom, and encourage you to also write your questions into the chat box. We'll start with a few questions to begin, but then we'll start off with a few of your questions from the chat box. So my first question to Micah and Madeline is, you've both had STEM internships that have helped you to get to where you are today. Can you share a little bit about what those programs were? And I'll start with you, Madeline.
Sure. So like you said in my bio, in 2018, over the summer, my first internship at the lab, I was part of the SULE program, and I was working on like a little engineering project for the indoor environment group, which was like very random for me and just something that I wanted to try out, not knowing anything about it before. And then the next summer, I returned for another SULE, but that time I was working on particle physics. So I was doing similarly kind of engineering stuff, working on electronics for one of the neutrino detectors in an experiment that they're working on right now. And then after graduating last spring, or in spring 2020, for the last year, I've been a Blur intern in the fall, spring, and now during the summer, working in the Atlas group, also on particle physics. So just all the undergrad internships.
Awesome. So you've taken advantage of those. And Colette, I'm going to ask you to help us out with some of those terms really quick. SULE and Blur, we'll get into more of that, but can you help us? What are those specific programs?
The SULE program is a national lab program that is funded by the Department of Energy, Office of Science, Workforce Development for Teachers and Scientists. So they have three major programs that are offered at all 17 national labs across the country. And that's the community college internship, that's the science undergraduate laboratory internship, the SULE program, although it has really expanded past undergraduate. Graduate students are now included as well. And then there's also the visiting faculty program, the VFP program. And I want to just say Madeline is like one of our crown jewels because she is really taking advantage of all of the opportunities at the lab, that pipeline through to really try to figure out her own path and carve her way into the STEM field and figure out where she wants to make a change and bring science solutions. So thank you, Madeline, for all of that.
Thank you, Colette, and thank you, Madeline, for starting us off. Micah, I'll start with you. You've gone through from undergrad to graduate to PhD and now a scientist here at Berkeley Lab. So can you tell us a little bit about those programs that helped you get to where you are?
Yeah, so I started my research career doing undergraduate research. It wasn't through an internship. I just asked my professor, and this is, I think, very common where, yeah, your kind of first research job, just talk to your professor, someone you're taking a class with that you're really interested in, which in this case was radiation detection. And so I build radiation detectors for my research, which is a bit of software and hardware, electronics, physics. It incorporates a lot of different skills, which makes it a lot of fun for me. So I got my start in undergrad just talking to professor. Between undergraduate and graduate school, I got an internship at the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is part of the United Nations. So I spent a summer in Vienna, Austria, over in Europe, and I got to learn about how all this stuff works at an international level. I met a bunch of people from all over the world that are doing science, and it was really awesome. And then during graduate school, I got an internship as part of my fellowship at Pacific Northwest National Lab. So that's in Washington State. And I got to work on some different types of radiation detectors than I usually did. So it was a really good experience just to broaden my skill set and expose me to things that it turned out were really useful for my PhD work. And so that's kind of it as far as internships go. But I would also like to give an honorable mention to things like workshops, which are kind of different depending on what your field is. But in our case, there's numerous 1 or 2 week workshops like every year, nuclear security, radiation detectors in certain contexts, things like that are super helpful, really beneficial, really expand your skills, expand your network immensely. You'll meet a lot of other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing. And that's it's really useful for you guys to be in touch. So yeah.
Awesome. And I like to say that both of you just talked about, your various experiences, but in the end, you ended up coming back here to Berkeley Lab for a few sessions into work. So what were the things that factored into you deciding Berkeley Lab is a place where I want to come back to and work? What happened during your first experiences there? And can you talk a little bit about the relationships you may have built in those experiences that helped you to feel welcome coming back or applying for another position here? Micah, if you want to start off.
Yeah, so a big part of it for me, I'm from San Diego, I'm from California. I always consider California home, and doing undergrad at Berkeley, I really like being in the Bay Area. So the location was a big part of it. Another big part of it was just the type of work I like to do and the environment I like to work in. So a lot of the national labs are related to the weapons complex and do classified work. And so there's a certain difference in the culture. It's a lot more serious, I guess, compared to here, where it's a little bit more laid back because we're really just thinking about doing basic science, solving, these kind of problems for society, increasing energy efficiency or helping cure diseases and things like that. So I wanted to be in a more laid back environment. And I had already worked with a bunch of people here since I did my undergraduate research here. So I was already familiar with the group and with the work that they did. I think the work that this group does specifically is really cool. It's cutting edge. No one else is doing this stuff that we're doing. And so the actual content of the work was also a big part of it. But just knowing that I was going to get along with my coworkers already, knowing that it was a place that I wanted to be, and that I already had some friends and family and stuff was a big help.
Thanks. How about you, Madeline? I know you're also a California native, so that's a big factor into it. So for those of you who are in the Bay Area, you want to think about places that might be able to welcome you back home after you've gone off maybe to college, because Barnard's New York. What were the other factors that kept you saying, hey, I'd like to come and explore? And you've explored multiple divisions here. So what factored into that?
Yeah, absolutely. The first internship was like purely location based. I wanted to live at home, so I applied for whatever I could that was in the Bay Area. And I really had no idea what I was getting into with it. I actually didn't even really know where the lab was, even though I grew up in the Bay. I went for the first day and realized that that's what was at the top of the street. And I actually, like, project-wise, did not love what I was doing the first summer, which was good data, like that's okay. But I did realize that even just like, I didn't know what working in a lab looked like, but having that experience allowed me to see, okay, these are the things that are at Berkeley Lab. My mentor was really good at introducing me to people, which I think is a big part of the culture at Berkeley. And the reason why I came back was because I realized that I could like focus more on physics, which is what I thought I wanted to do. And like just it's such a social environment. So being able to meet all these different people introduced me to different groups, which is why I've bounced around so much. And then especially that second summer when I was working on physics research, my advisor then too was very good at like, he literally set up meetings for me with other people, other physicists at the lab, which is how I got the position that I'm in this year. So a big part of it was just knowing that there were so many experiences I could have coming back. And then I also kind of realized that all the people doing work at Berkeley Lab are big deals in the field. So when I started to tell other people, grad schools I was interested in and professors at the school that I was at, who I had been working with and what I'd been working on, they all knew of all of those people, which was not something I was expecting when I first came in that first summer. I literally just wanted to be near home, but that's why I kept coming back.
Awesome. So location matters, but definitely having a good relationship with that mentor can also put you on some different paths. Colette, I want to move to you as a manager of many of these programs. What motivates you to, make sure that students get to the right spaces, and how do you help them to navigate their positions, especially since it's so short, 6 to 8 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks can go by really fast. What advice do you give to them as they're navigating their position?
I think that we try to encourage all of our interns to take the approach that Madeline has taken. I think when you're in academia, like when you're in school, you're trained to hyper-focus, right? This is the designated path. Whereas at Berkeley Lab, we really have a team science approach where people come together and it's really exploratory with how we approach our problems and our solutions. And we take that same approach with workforce development. So we encourage our interns and really try to create a safe space to allow them that self-exploration with their career paths. So we encourage them to go with, just like Madeline came for the location and she just wanted to experience it, right? If that's how you get your feet wet, we're open to that. And then we encourage you to attend talks, networking lunches, so that you can expand your network and build a community to help you navigate and figure out how you want to evolve and grow and participate in research, right? We don't want to cage you or force you. We really, really, really embrace the team science and exploratory approach. And so all of our programs, there is a suite of them that anyone can participate in. So you can start off with a community college internship. You can do that twice. Then you go into SULE. You can do that twice. And then we have the BLUR program, where we encourage you to be a little bit more specific, where you already have a relationship with a scientist. And if you want to continue that relationship, that research. And so you can have up to 4 years where it's really exploratory. And then hopefully after that 4 years, if you still want to stay, there are other pathways that can help you hone in on the research interests that do that align with your career goals. So that's really how we try to approach it: collaboration, to create, to connect with people, so that you can find your space, that you can do the work that you want to do. And our programs are here to support you in that effort.
We have put the link to workforce development and education in the chat box. So if you want to know more about programs, you can check out the above website. One person asked, did you all always know which path or field you guys were going into? So I think that's where Madeline and Micah, you both talked about nuclear engineering and physics. And so you said, you maybe knew about that, for Madeline, you maybe knew about physics, but not specifically what area, because physics is so vast. Micah, I don't know how you get exactly to nuclear engineering right away. So, can you tell us about, deciding this is the space that I want to navigate to? Micah, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so I always liked science growing up. I was taking things apart as a kid, a whole bunch. And my dad's really into radios. So I had like electronic equipment around and radios that were taken apart in soldering irons and things like that. So I was exposed to it pretty young. I also had an older brother who was really, really into computers. So I ended up getting really into computers when I was really young and computer programming. So when I applied to school for university, I applied as electrical engineering and computer science major and thought I was going to do more programming stuff. And my second year, I took a seminar on nuclear engineering that covered all the different applications of nuclear stuff. So medical is a really big one, and there's a bunch of industrial applications. And of course, nuclear weapons, there's a lot of history there. And so after learning about all this stuff, I was like, wow, this looks really cool. There's all this different stuff that I could do with this. And also it sounds really cool. Being a nuclear engineer is pretty uncommon. And there's not a ton of programs across the country. It's kind of a special thing. So yeah, it just was really exciting. And then I talked to my professor, got into the research, and found that it was a lot of fun combining all these different skills.
Madeline, if you want to take on that question, how did you navigate to physics in the first place?
Yeah. So if you asked anyone who knew me like pre-high school, they would have told you that I said I wanted to be an artist. I was like I don't know, I loved building things, but I never really saw that as like something that I would do as a career, or like that would have any connection to things that I could pursue that were like actually interesting to me. So I thought I was always going to end up doing something like with making things. When I got to college, I turned that more into engineering. I was like, okay, I think I can probably, or like architecture maybe. I didn't really know what I wanted to do freshman year of college. And then, like I said, when I had that first internship that I was doing just because I was in the area, I learned like what it looks like to do any kind of engineering, and that I liked the engineering aspect of it, but I didn't really like what was driving it, or like it wasn't super compelling to me what was driving it. And then I actually switched my sophomore year to start a major in physics, and then I knew nothing about like what physics research was, or what particle physics was, or high energy physics. And I remember like selecting on my preferences for the SULE application high energy physics because it sounded really cool, but I like literally didn't know what it was. And when someone offered me a project working on neutrino detection, I didn't know what a neutrino was, but the way that the person ended up being my mentor described the project was just like the coolest thing I'd ever heard. So when I worked with him, I started to understand like that's what physics research is, and that when people say they'd like work on particle physics, they're like building detectors, and I got to like solder a lot of things and like physically build stuff. And the motivation of it was looking at the universe and all of these things that like have definitely been very interesting to me, but I didn't realize was like something I could connect to other passions of like making things. So that's what got me hooked on physics. And then, like I said, with talking to him and with meeting other mentors and other people at the lab, I started to get a picture of like what it actually looked like to do physics research. And I liked it so much that that's why I'm still here and why I applied to grad school. And that's how I came to that path.
Awesome. So I have a question from the chat box. It says, which companies and industries have research opportunities that don't include testing on animals, not including flies? It's difficult to imagine what research opportunities can align with my values. So Colette, I'll let you answer that one since you talk with all of our divisions and know a little bit about what's happening everywhere. How are our research opportunities in terms of research on
All
animals?
right. Oh, we're free and clear. There's only a really tiny, tiny, tiny bit of research, but I mean, I would probably say 98% really is animal free. We're focused on energy and really bringing science solutions to the world. I say this, some people don't like it, but I'm like, we're like the nice, One Love Lab. We don't do any weapons research. We're all the good, non-classified. You can feel good about it. This is like public science. This is really good governance of really trying to solve problems and make the world a better place. I know it may sound corny, but that really, it exists here. And that's really what Berkeley Lab is about, seriously. So if you don't want to deal with any of that, there is just a really tiny, tiny portion of that work at the lab. And it is almost nanoscale.
Awesome, thank you. And then a question, and I'll give this back to Madeline because you've just done this. When you were in college, how did you manage your time so you could get ahead in both school and your internships?
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is that I actually never did any research during college at school. And that was very intentional for me because I was at Barnard is a liberal arts college, so I really wanted to take advantage of like doing non-STEM classes, which I think is like very important. If you have other interests, you should balance your time and like feel free to pursue stuff like that. So I really consolidated all my research stuff during the summers. And I'm really glad that I did that because I think that I was worried that I was behind. A lot of my peers like did research at school. And there are ways to manage that. Often like it's like factored into schedules and sometimes you can get class credit for things like that. But yeah, for me personally, I did it research over the summer and then during school, I just put like all of my energy and time into my classes and that worked for me. I also tried to take a bunch of extra physics classes and stuff like that once I started to realize that that's what I really wanted to do. But I think that, yeah, there's lots of ways to use every month of the year. And some people also take semesters off. So I think that semesters off to just like fully do research. But I can't really speak to doing research during the school year.
Okay, so I'll ask Micah.
I can. Yeah. So, and I basically took the opposite approach where I paid my entire way through school. And so doing research was a matter of paying the rent for me. I had to work a job during the school year to pay my bills. And in fact, at one point I was working 3 jobs in addition to taking 5 technical courses. And so after my 3rd year, I got totally burnt out on school and took an entire year off. I just did research work so I could continue to pay the rent. But yeah, I took a year off from school so I could kind of get my head in the right place and figure out how to manage my time and how to balance things in a way that I could stay sane. So yeah, and I came back, after that year and finished undergrad. My GPA was terrible. I finished undergrad with a 2.7. So I really want to stress, don't let that discourage you if you have a hard time. Everyone's journey is going to be a lot different. It depends heavily on your background and what you've got going on in your life when you go to school. And, there's a lot of things outside of school that impact your ability to be a good student. And so just take your own path and do things at your pace. And it might feel a little slow sometimes, but getting there the right way is always worth it. And it's really good that I took the year off and I took 2 years off after undergrad and just did research work before I decided I wanted to go to grad school because I really wasn't sure that I wanted to take the plunge and I wasn't convinced that it would be useful for me. But after doing 2 years of research after my bachelor's, I realized that doing all the really cool stuff and working at the highest level meant getting a PhD. And I kind of joke sometimes that working at the national labs is kind of like playing in the NBA from a research standpoint. Like, it really is the highest level. These are the best people at what they do in the world. And it's really incredible and sometimes very humbling to be here and work with such brilliant people that are really, really dedicated to this work.
Awesome. We got a lot of questions. I think you guys just like buzzed everybody up to they woke up. So what are some, I will go back to actually just one quick question that we had of most students are just starting off their summer internship programs right now. So within the first couple of weeks of them joining a laboratory, of them starting a new project, what advice would you give them to stand out, to make sure they make the best first impression and make sure they have a good summer within their position? So Colette, I'll start with you. And again, what advice would you give to someone just starting out? What would they need to establish in the first couple of weeks to make it a good summer?
I would say listen and ask a lot of questions. And I would just say, not just in an internship, but I think all of us on this panel can relate to this. Anytime you get a new job, you enter a new group or committee or whatever, it's important for you to listen and ask questions so that you can understand the landscape. And what I mean landscape is how it works, whose role is whose, what's the objective, so that you understand how everything is laid out. And there's always this urge when you're new, right, that you want to make your mark, that you want to stand out, that you want to show how you can contribute, you want to show that you're valuable. But it's important for you when you first start off that you sit back, you listen, and you ask questions. And then that allows you to have a full understanding of the landscape so that you can amplify and leverage your skill set and figure out how exactly you will be the most valuable in the way that is comfortable for you and for the team with your contribution, right? If you understand the landscape, if you listen and ask questions, and you can understand how you can really integrate your skill set and what you bring to the table appropriately. So listen and ask a lot of questions would be the first thing that I would say you do when you start off in an internship or any new venture, to be quite honest.
Agreed. Micah, Madeline, anything to add to that?
I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this. I would say the first thing that was relevant to me is like imposter syndrome is a real thing. And I just remember that like when I arrived, I was like, I don't know who I am here. I don't know how I fit into any of this. And then like slowly, I think as I came back multiple times, that like helped me feel more comfortable. And then once I was very comfortable, I started being more successful because I came in just knowing that I could ask whatever questions I want. I'm there to learn. They want you to ask a ton of questions, and it almost looks worse when you don't ask a ton of questions because then they're wondering what you're sitting there thinking about. So once I got over this hurdle of like thinking that I was like didn't belong and like would look stupid if I asked things, I started to be like wildly successful. And I know that I got a lot of good feedback on just the fact that I asked so many things, like even the questions that I thought made me sound like I didn't know anything, but like I kind of realized that the point is that you don't know anything, and that's why you're there as an intern, because you're supposed to be learning. So I think asking a bunch of questions and like not being afraid to ask for readings and ask for materials like looks really good and is really helpful to you. And then also just establishing, sorry, it's a little loud outside. Establishing like how you're going to communicate with your mentor is super important, and feeling comfortable with them and comfortable in your relationship, asking like what milestones you want to reach and when they want you to reach them, having effective communication just throughout the entire time, and like setting expectations from the start is definitely super useful and not something you should be afraid of doing.
All right, definitely. So we got the listening, we got the asking questions and setting some goals, objectives. Micah, what else is on our list?
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much covers it from my standpoint. Being curious is really the number one thing to me. Just, yeah, asking lots of questions. Scientists just love talking about their research. So you really can't go wrong asking about what they're working on, asking to see their workspace. You'll learn a lot about how professional scientists operate if you actually look at how they do their experiments and how they organize themselves. It's really just useful. So yeah, ask lots of questions.
And I want to ask the quick question of what do you do if you don't like your project? Madeline, you touched on a little bit of this. You get in there, you saw the workspace, you thought it was going to be cool. I had an internship at NASA, I recently just mentioned, and I was doing water quality at the water fountains. I'm at NASA, water fountains. What do you do if you don't have that project that you thought was going to be great? How have you navigated that? Micah, I'll go back to you if you had that experience.
Yeah, so probably not as directly as Madeline. My thesis work, like I have certain personal qualms with the usefulness of the thing that we were doing, and so it felt like kind of a pointless exercise sometimes. But the way that I address it is just, I consider it maybe just a form of tests. Like instead of, you never want to do a bad job. Like if nothing else, do an even better job on the thing that's like kind of boring, because you're really going to raise eyebrows when you take the really boring thing and then suddenly do an incredible job at whatever they asked you to do. That's going to get looks for sure. So, look for other opportunities, and I would say communicate clearly to your mentor, the people involved, that if you don't like the work, then try to pursue something else. But at the same time, maybe take it as an opportunity to learn something new or a little different that you wouldn't necessarily look into yourself, and to just do a really good job at it, and maybe get yourself noticed a little bit.
Madeline, if you want to talk about how
it was a little loud outside. I was trying to wait for it to whatever they're doing. So I should say, because I'm acting like I really didn't like this project. I didn't like the project, but I still have a really good relationship with that mentor. So I talk to him all the time. I've had dinner at his house. We're actually quite close now. I know his kids. So like part one was just like keeping this relationship with him because he's been a really good advocate for me. And I was just upfront about like, I'm not going to come back and do more of this work because I want to do something else. But having that relationship was like super valuable. And I really see him as like the catalyst for just me knowing like, what is a lab? What does research look like? But then when I was there, I think when I started to realize I didn't like what I was doing, just to give background on what I was actually doing, I was like designing this little camera that would detect when people were cooking or not for the sake of indoor air quality, which meant that I was literally going around 2 different homes in the Bay Area and cooking a meal. I cooked the same meal like 8 times and recorded it with this little infrared camera. And I was like, okay, what skills can I get out of this? Because I'm here for 10 weeks. And that was actually my first introduction to like doing anything with Python. Like I had never coded anything before. So I took it as an opportunity to get skills with that. And I asked for a little more responsibility on like dealing with the data output of this camera, and just like, realizing that I wanted to figure out what I wanted to learn from it was probably the best thing I got out of it, especially when I just didn't like what I was doing. I think there's just always something to learn, and you can always ask for like more responsibility if you think that there's something that you could be getting out of it. So in the end, it was still really valuable.
There's something really educational about taking ownership over a project that you wouldn't have pursued yourself or that you're not necessarily super invested in. Yeah.
And Colette, since you are pairing a bunch of students every year with mentors, what's some advice that you give to them, and that you hear from mentors they're wanting to, have their students embody as they join their research labs?
Well, I think a lot of times there's this perception that there are a set number of projects, right? There are these projects, and that there's a pool of students, and that there's someone that's, matching them directly. And it actually, that's not how science works. And so in the way that we approach our programs is that we encourage students, applicants, potential interns to actually go to our website, look at the research, anything that interests them, to connect with those scientists, read their publications and reach out to them, either ask for a tour of their lab, try to connect with a postdoc, right? And there's something about what Madeline said and also what Micah said. Even if you don't, okay, so let me go back. When you do that reaching out, a lot of times a project will develop, right? It's not until that scientist talks to the student that they learn about their interests and their background, and that will help them figure out how that applicant or student can plug and play to an existing project. Or a lot of times they come up with a small part of a project that they never had the resources for, that never occurred to them, but because the student came and was like, hey, I have this idea. I read your work. This is a great publication. This is what I'm thinking. And then the scientist goes, oh, wow, that didn't occur to me. Yeah, I can bring you in through one of these programs, SULE, CCA, or whatever, to work on this, right? And then there's this other side of it, what Madeline spoke to, is that just the opportunity of getting the experience. It's like, yeah, it's not your dream discipline. It's not at all what you want to work on, right? But there's this opportunity to come and work with this amazing, brilliant scientist on something. And there's professional development in that. There's experience in that. And the way that the lab works is, even if you come in and it's not exactly what you want, there's the opportunity to connect with other people so that you can learn about other projects, and there are inroads into those projects. So I always tell people, and I mean, a lot of times I think people are expected to, because of algorithms, we are used to getting what we want really quickly, right? Amazon, 2 days, right? TikTok gives you on your FY page, your For You page, exactly what you want. However, in the real world, you may have to meet people on your own and figure it out. And taking advantage of these programs and experiences at the lab can provide you with inroads to figure that out. So don't be blindsided by this myopic way of thinking that, oh, this is not what I'm interested in. Being on site, having access to other scientists and the networking in the community is really invaluable of experience as far as professional development and opportunities.
Thank you for that. That you guys are giving some really great information. So I hope everybody's listening and taking down notes. Micah, I'm going to give you a specific question, which is, would you say there is a lot of room for growth in the field of nuclear energy? Other than energy, are there any other career options with nuclear engineering?
Absolutely. So the U.S. is still very slowly pursuing nuclear power, nuclear energy. We've kind of leveled out in terms of the number of reactors that we have, just because energy demand hasn't increased very much in the United States, and natural gas has filled most of that. And so it has been a little bit sad for nuclear engineers from that standpoint, but the things that are kind of next are small modular reactors. So we're working on new reactor technology, both smaller reactors and reactors that work a bit differently, like maybe the fuel's not solid, maybe the coolant's not water, maybe it's a gas instead. And so people have all these really great ideas for how to build a nuclear reactor completely differently than we do it now. And that's research that is ongoing. There's work going on there for sure. There's modeling software, simulation, calculation stuff, and then there's also experimental work, understanding the materials challenges, and all sorts of stuff. And so definitely an active area of development. But nuclear power or nuclear engineering isn't just nuclear power, and is arguably not primarily nuclear power. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that we do, and medical is probably the next biggest one. It's one that's growing like majorly, even still. All the imaging technologies, so a CAT scan or a PET scan, MRI, all that sort of stuff is nuclear. That's nuclear engineering. Radiation therapy, treating cancer, also still all nuclear engineering. Particle accelerators, things like that. That's how that stuff works. And so there's a ton of work to do there for sure. You could work in what Madeline does, doing high energy physics, building detectors, trying to understand basic science. And then there's a whole slew of industrial kind of applications that people don't even think about, using radiation to look inside of things the same way that we use it to look inside of people. Well, it's really useful for looking inside of objects, machines, things like that, looking for defects in welds or any number of different things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in nuclear, and it's not something that's going to go away at all as a technology space.
Thanks, Micah, for giving us that. And if anybody else has specific questions for Madeline around high energy physics or what she might be working on later as she starts her PhD, feel free to put those in the chat box. I want to go back to a few questions here. What do you wish you knew before entering your respective fields? What's your favorite and least favorite part? Madeline, I see you thinking, but if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about what I wish I knew. I feel like a lot of stuff is more just like what you can do with it and how that affects, like, to be completely honest, like financially, I'm really still trying to understand like how it's going to work for me to potentially rise through academia or like go back to working at the lab. That's something I still wish I knew more about as I'm entering a PhD, especially in a field that's very, because what I do right now is very like, what is the most like fundamental thing we can understand about the universe? I think I'm still trying to understand. I know that I'm interested enough to pursue a PhD in it, and I'm still trying to look into like how that's going to affect my career, but I think I'm starting to get pieces about that there's other things that I can do with it if it's not academia, which is what I think I'm most interested at this point. So that's like maybe my least favorite thing about it is that I'm not sure where it's going to take me, but that's also very exciting and not necessarily a bad thing. That's all I can really think of.
Micah, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, nuclear specifically, it's like a lot of engineering and science fields where it's very homogenous from a kind of representation standpoint. It's very overwhelmingly men and white men, and it does lead to certain challenges. And you know, I kind of wish I had known how difficult it would be to push people into the right direction and encourage them to increase the diversity of perspectives and backgrounds that are represented here. And it's something, you know, still always a struggle. And I think it's to some degree related to nuclear also has a very specific history because of weapons. And so there's this kind of almost like baggage in some sense associated with the field. I mean, if you meet people, like I've met a number of people just, you know, social gatherings with friends and stuff. I meet a new person, I say I'm a nuclear engineer. They say, oh, do you work on bombs? Do you make bombs and like weapons? And, you know, it's kind of a mean thing to assume that someone works on building destructive, you know, things. And so there's a history that like we really have to confront as nuclear engineers and as a field as a whole. There's things that we need to address and history we need to be accountable for. So that's something that's always kind of, I'm always thinking about, and I'm thinking about how we do things in the future and how we move forward in a way that tries to at least account for this and tries to not make the same mistakes we've made in the past.
I would just quickly like second the thing about homogeneity in the field. I don't know why that's not the first thing that came out of my mouth, because that's absolutely my least favorite thing about it, but is also like kind of a nice thing to, it's a little bit of a driving force.
I'm gonna do another question around applications for college applications, whether you're, does it matter whether your internships in colleges align with your major, since the person is still exploring the majors that they can be in? So internships may not align with their specific major. Colette, I'll hand that over to you to start.
For our programs, and I think actually most programs, especially at the undergraduate level, it's really not about whether the internship aligns. It's really about the skills that you have developed there and that you have some experience. A lot of our interns have absolutely no research experience, and that's exactly how our mentors would like to work with them, nice and green, so that they can mold them and show them their protocol, and really show and integrate them into the team science approach and how we collaborate here at Berkeley Lab. So having any experience, and on our applications, there are 3 essay questions. One is your work experience, your research interests, and then also your personal experience. And in the personal experience, that's where we really want to learn about life-changing experiences that you have had that have formed your character or have helped you hone skills that have brought you to this place, or even applying for Berkeley Lab. So it's not necessarily that everything has to match or align. It really is seeing that you have committed to something, you've grown, you've gained some skills, and how those skills can apply to that research group and the mentor that is doing the selections.
Thank you for that. And I know we have a ton of high school students on this, so we are going to put the K12 high school programs in the chat box as well for those of you who might be sophomores or juniors who still have a few more years until you get to the community college and undergraduate programs. Here at Berkeley Lab, we are wanting to make sure that you do start to get to hear about some of that research and possibly take part in some of it. And that's why we're doing this career talk. So not only do you hear about it in high school, but you know about it when you go off to undergrad into those community college, so that you're able to go ahead and apply. So I want to come back to a question of what are your career goals? And person put long-term and short-term. That's a hard question. So I'm going to give people a pass if they don't answer that fully. Madeline, you just a little bit talked about, you're still navigating. So can we talk about a little bit about how being in a STEM profession might be, helping those thoughts around your career? And is it helpful to be in a STEM field, or is it, a little bit of a barrier to be in a STEM field? So I'm combining a little bit of 2 questions for your goals, and how is being in a STEM field helpful to those goals? Micah? Well.
Yeah, so that's definitely a tough question. And, up until a little more than a year ago, when I defended my PhD, my career goals were like survive getting a PhD. And that was kind of the main thing. And so I guess now that I'm a little bit past that, I'm enjoying my kind of engineering job here. I am a little bit different from a lot of the researchers here in that, like, I'm an engineer, and so I tend to just build things, and we build systems that we have to deliver to our funding agencies. And so it is a little bit different than the experimental science kind of motivated things that go on here. But I do enjoy just kind of being an engineering grunt that just builds things all day and gets to write code and play with hardware and stuff. I have been, I'm gonna teach a class this fall, actually, at my university where I got my PhD, University of Tennessee. So I've been looking at kind of, I guess, teaching opportunities in ways that I can be more involved in my field and be like a mentor to other people. And so career goals, that's actually kind of what I'm thinking more about now. Whereas in terms of my actual day job, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at here, and we'll continue to do this for a while.
Madeline, career goals.
So some things that I understand about myself at this point, based on experiences, is that I really adore teaching and mentoring. Every opportunity I've had to do, like tutoring, teaching, instructing, anything, I've loved it. And I also really love my research. I love thinking about building things and being tangible with stuff, and I just love physics. That's why I'm doing it. So for me, I'm like, okay, naturally that means that I should probably become a professor or try to go through academia. And I say that with a sigh, because academia, from my understanding, is pretty brutal, and especially getting like a professorship, it's really hard because there's like only so many positions, and there's only so many cities that at this point I would like to live in. So that is kind of challenging me on my brain right now, but also because I've had so much experience at Berkeley Lab and I've like seen the careers of people who just like do the staff scientist thing and just like are scientists at the lab and they still get a ton of mentorship opportunities. That's something I'm like also potentially very interested in. Or I could just be a teacher. I see that as a potential route for myself, like teaching at a community college or teaching even at a high school is something I think I would really love. In the back of my mind, I know that I also have like, you know, student loans and like things to consider in this. So like rising in those ranks is complicated in my mind. So in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, with a PhD in physics, I know that there's tons of opportunities for me in industry. I don't know very much about it, but like I've just convinced myself that it's always a backup. But it's not great that I'm calling it a backup. So yeah, still TBD on how I'm going to go through everything, but I definitely know that I would love to be a professor or a scientist.
Yeah, we just call them pathways now. Which pathway? I'm going to ask a quick question if someone asks, do experienced researchers get annoyed when high schoolers contact them to potentially work with them? Any advice as to how we should go about that? Or it could be specifically even talking about high school, are researchers okay with people who don't know anything, you know, when they first join? And I'll say again, we put our high school programs in the chat box. So those are definitely direct ways in which you can get involved with some of our researchers in a more formal way. But contacting them directly, I think, is something that a lot of students have done in the past, and that's worked as well. Colette, if you want to add any additional advice to that.
They don't mind at all. I would just say you can't email a scientist and say, I like your science, right? I want to make sure that you do the background, like do your research, read their publications. And then when you're emailing them and contacting them about a potential internship or an informational interview or a tour of their lab, however you choose to engage with them, having them come to speak at your class or with your organization or your group, just make sure that you understand their work and you can speak to your interest in their work and the why behind it. And I think if you do all those things, that is a great way to open up a discussion about the potential to collaborate or partner or how you can work together or explore opportunities together. So no, they definitely don't mind as long as you have done some background work to understand what their research is about and why it excites you. And that opens up the discussion for exploration.
All right. We're going to do one quick CCI program, but the deadline has passed. So any advice for a community college student that would still be looking for opportunities in fall, winter, or spring, Colette?
So for the CCI program, it's often offered all year round. So spring, I don't have the dates in front of me, but spring will be opening soon. So there's always an opportunity year round to apply. The CCI program is offered at all 17 national labs. At Berkeley Lab, we don't allow you to take classes while you participate in our programs because it is considered a full-time 40-hour week job. And then you also have the research paper and all these meetings, and you have to also do a poster. So in order for you to be successful, you are not allowed to take classes. So if you do want to participate during the semester, we will require that you're taking a semester off to participate. But that's up to you how you want to handle that. But there are opportunities all year round to participate in the CCI program.
Thank you. And I'm going to do our last question with our last 5 minutes. I know some people thought I forgot their question earlier on, and it was, what advice would you give to yourself as a high school student? Or you can give, what advice would you give to an incoming freshman into college? So right there at the just finishing high school, just starting off freshman year, what advice either are you giving to potential students or to yourself? You can choose either or option. Colette, I'll go back to you and then to Micah and then to Madeline to finish us out.
Have fun. have fun. Like seriously, freshmen, have fun. You can't fail. You're not going to go wrong. I mean, be disciplined and dedicated to your studies and everything that you're pursuing. But this is really the opportunity to be exploratory and figure out what you want to do. I think a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to follow this, distinct path. And for me personally, I had everything laid out from when I was a kid on my career path. I planned it out. I had a whole bunch of lists. I met every milestone, but the way that the universe worked, none of that even mattered. Luckily, I'm an extrovert and I was able to, I participated and led a lot of organizations. Just like Madeline said, when she's in school, it's liberal arts. She wants to explore all these other stuff. She saved her research for the summer. Do the things that make you happy. Please don't box yourself in as a freshman. Really, really take advantage of any and everything. Stay grounded. To make sure that you keep your grades up and you're handling that academically so that you don't fall behind. But even if you do fail in some areas, it's going to be okay. It's just the beginning. Don't beat yourself up and just accept that this is a part of your journey. So that's what I would have told myself.
Thank you, Colette. Micah.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that and want to second, have fun. Go at your own pace and take the path that makes sense and is comfortable to you and is most conducive to your own success. People along the entire way will constantly be telling you, oh, you should do it this way or you should do it this way. And really, they're often just telling you what worked for them, but that might not be the thing that works for you. I mentioned having to take a year off and do research. And at the end of that year off, I went to Europe and I worked on a farm in the middle of France for a month. And it was a whole bunch of fun. And I got an experience I just never would have otherwise. So, you really have to go at your own pace. And despite, having such a bad GPA and stuff, if you're really interested in the work and really show motivation, people will, there's no hole that you can't dig yourself out of in terms of GPA or test scores or something. You really have to stick at it and figure out, what you really want to do and what's best for you, and then just go for it. And when you take that initiative, I think you'll be fine. Take your own path and just enjoy it along the way. There's a lot of stories I could tell, and trials and things, difficulties I encountered across grad school. But it made me a better person. It made me smarter and a more well-rounded scientist and engineer. Do you?
I definitely second everything that's already been said. And then not to project too much and assume that everyone's feeling this way or harp too much on the imposter syndrome thing. For me, that was just a really real barrier, I guess, coming into college and into internships. So I kind of wish that I had someone tell me over and over again, wherever you are, you completely belong there. You're completely allowed to take advantage of every opportunity that exists. I think that's how people generally measure, were you successful wherever you were? Is did you take advantage of things that were around, and did you pursue all the things that you felt you wanted to pursue? And it was a little slow for me getting to that, but just I want to say, for anyone who really needs to hear it, you completely deserve to do whatever you're doing. You completely deserve to be there, and just taking up the space in whatever spaces you're in. That's what they're there for. They're there for you to take them up, and they're there for you to pursue all the things and ask all the questions. And I wish I had come in a little more with that attitude, and I hope that's how I'm going to approach grad school.
Awesome. I'm going to end on that note of you deserve to be there. Madeline, thank you for finishing off with that great piece of advice to everybody. And thank you for all of us for joining us today in the first of our summer series. We will see you for the next 3 Fridays in July. Next week, we'll be diving into some research around the future of farming and food. So join us with our researchers and chef who will be talking about how they're navigating food production in the face of climate change. So we look forward to seeing you next week. We will have this recording for all of you who might want to share this information with friends, colleagues, or those you might think might be interested in this information. So thanks for joining us, everybody, and have a wonderful 3-day weekend. So thanks to our panelists as well. Thank you, Colette, Micah, Madeline. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Faith.
Take care. Thanks, Faith. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.